All right, Rachel, Charles and I will let people in, but I've just started the recording. If we want to go ahead and get started, it's 1:30.
Okay, and you'll let us know, I have a question for the good of the order kind of a thing. In terms of our, how many people do we have to have a quorum in order to vote on members? Anybody know that off the top of their head?
Not off the top of my head. Charles, can you pull up the bylaws?
So, I mean, we can call the meeting to order and, but before we get a quorum, I don't know that we can look at the minutes.
It's half, so
It's half. Oh, good. Jerome knows.
if there are 44 current active folks, maybe
Yeah.
23 technically. We're probably getting close. I can see the numbers of people logging on ticking up. So
We're at what, 17 now? Yeah. So, well, I'll get started at least with my quick report to the group. We've got, thank you all for showing up on screen, those of you who've made it thus far, and I'm sure we'll get some more. And I'm happy to see some of you who are rolling off as well. Eddie, we're going to miss you among other people. It's been a pleasure working with you, but chances are we'll have another Angelus with us soon. So we are, I think we're not quite yet. We have 20 now, I think. No, 19. So there's, unfortunately, we've lost several members of the XCOM, and so we're going to have some committee chairships opening up, which is good because it tends to have people get more engaged even than they already are. And otherwise, it's been a challenging year. Those have heard about a little bit about name change and some of the school's restorative actions. I'm sure we're going to hear more from David about that. So with this said, I want to turn it over. Can we even do the nominations committee yet, or should we skip to David? We have enough? Okay, then let's get to the minutes first. Does anybody want to make comments, make changes, move to put them in? Last meeting. Why don't everybody volunteer at once?
I'll
Thanks,
move,
Jerome.
I move them.
I'll move approval.
I
Okay,
second.
thank you. Any nays? Abstentions? All right, just wave as long as you're saying yes. Up your hand. We'll see if we get unanimous waves. I like Kelly's thumbs up too. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the nominations committee. And I don't think we have Terry here, do we? So Eddie, you're up.
Well, first of all, thank you to obviously the nominating committee, Terry. I don't know whether she's able to join us or not, but it's been always a pleasure, and certainly appreciate Barbara and as well as Rachel's leadership and joining, as at least putting their input as respect to the folks that we have considered. We've also expanded the nomination committee with some additions. So with that in mind, you have the names of the nominees that we basically came up with and their bios and pictures, et cetera, that's in your packet. And so I will entertain a motion to accept the slate of nominees, and then hopefully, unless there's some discussion about pulling these names off or having further discussions about the nominees.
I move for approval of the slate of nominees. Jerome Pandel.
I second the motion.
Okay, great. It's been moved and seconded. And all in favor, I guess, and say, how about if I just assume it's a yes vote unless you lodge your no vote? Okay, hearing no votes, it's unanimous consent with respect to accepting all of the current nominees, and congratulations. And before I just want, as Rachel's already indicated, this is my last board meeting. I just want to thank staff, Dean Fagman and the group for allowing me to be a part of this family for the 3 years that I've been doing it. But I certainly, you will get a better Angelus to join you in the next iteration of the Governing Board Foundation, and that is my son, Andrew. And so he will carry on the legacy, which I'm sure at the dinner table we'll have opportunities to continue dialogue and how we can continue to contribute to this great school. So thank you to everybody.
Okay, so we are ahead of schedule and Dean's up next.
I have to unmute. Thank you, Rachel. It's great to see you all, and I always like to begin by thanking you. As I mentioned to the trustees, I know you get paid large sums of money for your service to the school, but seriously, we are deeply in debt to all the work that you do, your generosity philanthropically in terms of your time. And we're just deeply appreciative of your partnership as we go forward. And I see we have we'll get you an application, Mike, for your daughter. We want to sign them up early. Oh, daughters, great. So we're always looking for talented prospective students. So I'm going to talk about possibly up to 4 things. Since we have a little bit more time, I won't feel too constrained, but I'll certainly stay within my designated end time. The first thing I want to talk about are the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that we have been making on the campus. Those are subjects that I've been quite dedicated to for several years now, really in partnership with Morris Ratner, Mario Lopez, my chief of staff, Jenny Kwan, just a very large group of administrators and faculty at Hastings. As you will probably recall, we had a climate survey that we sent out during the pandemic, 2020, 2021, but we thought it was important to get the temperature of the campus. Obviously, the nation is going through difficult times in terms of polarization, lack of civility in discussion and conversation. And we wanted to get feedback from our students, staff, and faculty about how things were at Hastings and start getting ideas about what we can do to improve everybody, the community's sense of belonging, the sense of being valued and respected. And the only way we could do that was to go directly to our community and ask for candid responses. We did get those, the survey results. They were pretty good overall, especially during the pandemic. We can improve on. There were certainly some sense of among certain groups of not feeling respected, not feeling that they really belong to the greater community. I appointed a campus climate advisory committee that was headed up by Morris Ratner, but had students, staff, faculty, all represented on that committee. And I asked them to review the climate survey results and make recommendations to me. So I appointed that committee back in September 2021. I asked them to report back to me by the end of April 2022. They did that. They stayed right on time. And for those of you who know Morris Ratner, there was never any question that he would get it done in a timely fashion. That report I'm now working through. I've read it a couple times. They have over 120 recommendations, some fairly minor, just things that we can do in an institution, others a little bit more robust and dramatic and potentially a little bit more costly. I anticipate actually beginning some of the initiatives this summer, and then we will have a town hall at the end of August where I will report back to the entire community my responses to the recommendations, many of which I will follow, some of which I will amend, some of which I will supplement. And so the idea is that they would give me the best of their insights and wisdom, and I would use that as a platform to move forward. As you undoubtedly know, we had some difficulty this semester. The Federalist Society invited Ilya Shapiro, Georgetown lecturer, who has since been suspended because of a tweet he sent out regarding President Biden's likely nomination of a Black woman to the Supreme Court. The Federalist Society had invited him prior to that tweet going out, and they did not disinvite him. When he came to campus, as you know, a group of students shouted him down for about an hour. So he was never able to present to the community. Shortly, I was actually up in Sacramento when that happened, testifying before the Select Committee on Native American Affairs, another issue that we are dealing with, which I'll come to in a moment. And I sent out an email together with Provost and Academic Dean Ratner and Dean of Students Grace Hum, essentially, first of all, recognizing the pain and deep emotional sentiment that we recognized of marginalized communities and what the tweet that Shapiro was responsible for meant for those communities, but at the same time also recognizing that we are an academic institution. We are devoted to academic freedom and the principles of the First Amendment. We're a big tent. Every organization, whether it's the Black Law Students Association or the Hastings Jewish Lawyers Association, JILSA, or La Raza, or the Federal Society, have a right to put on events on campus, and they have a right to put on events that are not disrupted by the community more generally. That response wasn't welcomed by everybody. They then followed up, or a student group followed up with demands regarding the campus climate and things that they thought the administration should be doing. I then responded to that so-called demand letter with a description of all the things that the community had been doing in terms of things like the First Gen program, another diversity, equity, inclusion, including the climate survey and so forth. And that was sort of has been described as a treatise. I think it was about 8 pages, single spaced, describing all the things we've been doing, but also responding to the demands of the student letter. Some of the demands we actually already do. And so I think that there was a problem with communication, which I recognize that, having everybody in the community know all the things that are happening on campus is not always the easiest thing to do. Students and staff and faculty, for that matter, don't necessarily read their emails. And so it's going to be a continuing challenge to make sure that everybody is up to speed on the things that we're doing, and also have the opportunity to contribute and offer suggestions on things that we should be doing. So I do recognize that that is a need. We live in, very polarized, divided times, but as an academic institution, we need to be devoted to a civil discourse where disagreements are voiced, that people hear different points of view, but that nobody gets shut down on the right or the left. And so that's something that I've dedicated my entire career to, academic freedom and the First Amendment. And I think that our national leaders have not done an especially great job of modeling civil discourse in a constitutional democracy. And that's something that I think I should at least aspire to do. And I think that we should try to do that, whether it's the governors or the trustees or the faculty or student leadership. We need to model that level of civil discourse. We are, as I've said very often, we're a big tent. We have graduates who work doing corporate defense. We have graduates who do plaintiffs work. We have public defenders. We have DAs. We have people who work for the Sierra Club. We have people who work for Chevron and Exxon. That's what lawyers do. Lawyers advocate for a wide range of different points of view. And as a law school, as a professional school, it's our obligation to prepare our students to deal with the politics and the policies and the laws coming from many, many different directions. So just, want to, I know that, you all are deeply interested in the climate on the campus, care about our students, as we all do. And so I really wanted to bring those issues, and it's something that, I need to continue to work on myself to make sure that we don't shut down communication, that we find ways to open it up, but that we are respectful and open to other points of view, and then we meet them with good argument. The other issue I want to talk about, moving from one controversial area to one non-controversial area, the name change. I'm kidding, of course. So the name change issue has been an issue for me since 2017. So as you will recall, back in 2017, the San Francisco Chronicle published an op-ed that indicated that our namesake, Sir Ernest Hastings, and the namesake of Stanford University, Leland Stanford Sr., not Junior, who was just a child when Stanford was founded, had been involved in and promoted atrocities in the 1850s against various Indian tribes. Hastings in particular had promoted and committed atrocities against the Yuki tribe in Eden and Round Valleys. The Yuki are one tribe of 7 tribes that are now on the Round Valley Indian Reservation. And so the Round Valley Indian tribes are a federally recognized and sovereign entity, but there are 7 tribes that were essentially forced together by North American policies that basically did not distinguish between different tribes, and many of the tribes were warring with each other pre-colonial times, and they are ancestral enemies, but they were nonetheless forced together. So there are a lot of internal dynamics and politics that, quite admittedly, I don't understand all of them, but I'm being introduced to them. But it has complicated the situation a little bit. What I have done and what I did originally was, first of all, try to educate myself. I then asked an author of a book on 19th century California atrocities and genocide against Native populations to write a white paper specifically on Sir Ernest Hastings. I just thought that I needed to have a better understanding than the books had provided about Hastings's responsibilities himself for what happened in the 1850s. A lot of what happened was done by California, but done by the United States. A lot of the land that was stolen under color of state law. So it was, quote, not stolen because California law permitted the securing of that land. And so from Hastings's perspective in the 1850s, he was protecting his land, even though it was land that the Yuki had been on from time immemorial. So I also then appointed the Hastings Legacy Review Committee that was chaired by the then chair of the board of directors, Tom Getty, who's also an Indian law expert. They came back with a report recommending that we focus on restorative justice efforts, that there was a lot that we could do as a law school to assist the Round Valley tribes and tribes of Northern California, including pro bono opportunities, working with the tribal courts, and working on land conservation issues and so forth. We also identified the potential of a commemorative space at UC Hastings, and all those things went forward. And in my report to the board of directors, we were developing a great relationship with the tribes of Round Valley on these restorative justice efforts when the New York Times published a major article in late October, beginning of November 2021, which basically put the name issue back on the table and made it a national issue. There were, I think, over 2,000 responses in the New York Times to that article. Not all of them either friendly to me or friendly to the college. We also began hearing from our benefactors in Sacramento. We, of course, are an independent line item in Sacramento, so we listened very carefully to our legislators, as we should perhaps anyway, and they were concerned and wondered whether this was a direction that we all ought to go. Subsequently, and lots of things happened in the meantime, the board of directors in November 2021 voted unanimously to direct me to work with the California legislature and the governor's office to enact legislation that would take the Hastings name off of the school. In December 2021, in the second meeting, the board of directors recommended that the name that we put on the school have a geographic designation, and in particular, San Francisco. In the meantime, Assembly Member James Ramos got involved in some of these matters, especially with the tribes, and we began meeting and have met over the last 4 months to figure out what the legislation would look like that would take the Hastings name off and put a new name on the school. Just about a month ago, we finally came to resolution of that issue, and the bill that is now moving through the legislature is Assembly Bill 1936. So AB 1936 provides, among a number of restorative justice efforts, many of which we're already involved in, it provides and gives to the Hastings Board of Directors the authority to make a final recommendation to the legislature on the name of the school after consulting with the Round Valley Indian Tribes and the Yuki Committee designated by Round Valley. In my view, that's a very good result where it stands now, because it gives the school the authority to recommend the name. It doesn't take it away from the school. But we also have to undergo this consultation process, which I've been involved in really for the last 4 months, and the board now is getting involved in it. Yesterday's board meeting, we heard from tribal members that took very strong objection to, obviously, to the atrocities that occurred in the 1850s, not at all surprising. And they also advocated, for the most part, taking the Hastings name off of the school. A number of tribal members argued affirmatively that they hoped that the board would recommend a Yuki language name for the school, in particular the name Poenam. And Poenam means one people. Poa is one and Nam is people. Obviously, this is a long process. Over the next 6 weeks, we'll be having those conversations. We are not only consulting, as the legislation indicates, with Round Valley and the Yuki, but we have to consult with the University of California Office of the President, because we are an affiliate of the University of California, and they have very decided views about what the appropriate name would be, especially since we're in San Francisco and there's already a University of California San Francisco campus, and it's not us. We have been told and assured by the Office of the President and by UCSF that putting law between UC and SF would be acceptable, and that appears to be a view that's shared by many alumni, that having San Francisco in the name is a good thing. And if we can't have UCSF, and we can't have Harvard, and we can't have Princeton, University of California law, UC law, actually sounds pretty good. And then having San Francisco as part of the designation is a good thing as well. But this all will eventually culminate in a vote of the board, probably at the end of July. So right now, AB 1936 was passed unanimously by the Assembly. It is currently with the Education Committee in the Senate. The Education Committee will be hearing it sometime in June, probably the last week of June. And from there, it goes to the Appropriations Committee. It'll sit in the Appropriations Committee probably till the board makes its final recommendation at the end of July, and then the bill will be amended. So to include whatever name is being recommended by the board, and then it would have to be voted on by the Senate, and then it would have to go back to the Assembly because it's been amended, and it would have to be voted on again by the Assembly. It then would go to the governor's desk, and the governor would have to sign it by the end of August, by the end of the legislative session. So I think that's the timetable we're on. I do think, just to let you all know, that given the at least some members, not all tribal members, think that Poenam is a good name to attach to the school. But there may come a time when we would call upon the Board of Governors and the Board of Trustees and other alumni to have their views stated clearly to the board to balance and be more inclusive. We also may want, and again, if you think that an Indian native name is the appropriate, path forward, I respect that, and that's an individual decision. But we do think that it will be important for both the board and potentially the California legislature to hear from our alumni, as well as hear eventually from the University of California Office of the President. So this is a long process. I'm obviously living it day to day, and so there's a lot going on. I'm optimistic that it's going to end well. The Hastings name almost certainly will be taken off unless the bill fails altogether, which is always a possibility with the California legislature. And then it's a question of moving forward with the new name after that. So the last issue I wanted to touch on, actually two more issues. I said I would have four. So DEI, the name change. The third is our anticipation going forward of beginning a comprehensive campaign. So as some of you may have heard me say in the past, when I took over as dean 6.5 years ago, as first acting dean and then dean beginning in 2017, I inherited some challenges. Our bar passage rate was 51% for July 2016. That may be more than a challenge, that was a disaster. Our employment numbers were not terribly strong. There was a sense of drift. We had not yet started building 333. We had no idea what we were going to do with the 198 building. We had not really developed any partnerships besides UCSF. And where we've been, and it's by no means me alone that's done any of this, but with fantastic advancement and development department, we have tripled, if not quadrupled, the amount of giving that we've been receiving over the years. We have moved our bar passage rate from 51% to over 80% the last 3 years. 2 years ago it was 87%, last year was 84%. And so we seem to have sustained success with the bar. As Amy Kimmel, who gets an awful lot of credit in her department, I see that she's on, our employment numbers this year are 93%. And obviously 93% is fantastic. But we want to keep going. We want 95%, 98%. But it is, just a huge improvement over the years. And again, Amy Kimmel's office and Amy get a ton of credit. So the view that I have is that we have righted the ship. Things are going well internally. We've created great centers just over the last several years. We've created the Center for Racial and Economic Justice, the Indigenous Law Center, the Business Law Center, the Tax Law Center, and they all illustrate the big tent that we are. We have the Center for Racial and Economic Justice and the Tax Law Center. That's what we are, as a great law school that's big enough to sustain this, what lawyers do really across the board. And so where we are today, even though giving is way up, we're over $16 million this year, and we're not done with the fiscal year until the end of June. And we've never, as an institution, gone over $16 million. But if we really want to be one of the preeminent law schools in the country. I think we are demonstrating it with our bar, with our employment, with our curriculum, with our centers, with our externships, with the capital and the buildings. But when you look at the great public law schools around the country, the one thing that they have that we don't have is endowments, big endowments to sustain scholarships for students. Just to give you one example, so US News has begun using student indebtedness, which is actually an understandable factor in their rankings. And it hurt us this year. We went up in peer rankings. We went up in lawyer judge rankings. Lawyer judge rankings, we were 24th in the country this year. Peer rankings, we were 36th in the country. So those are pretty strong numbers. But for student indebtedness, we were 142nd in the country. Our average student indebtedness is $136,000. And so if you're graduating students and they have $136,000 in debt, that means that they're not going to be able to work for the Immigration and Legal Resources Center. They're not going to be working as public defenders. They're not going to be, their opportunities for what kinds of jobs they can take with that level of indebtedness is just going to be restricted. And the way you reduce student indebtedness is by providing scholarships. And that's something that we need to do. And the way we do that is by building an endowment. And when you compare us to UCLA or Berkeley, or, God forbid, Michigan and Virginia, and Michigan and Virginia each have billion-dollar endowments, billion-dollar law school endowments. It's not the university, it's just the law school. And our endowment is around 45 million. We need to get our endowment up to 100 million, 150 million, 200 million. That's what's going to put us at the next level to be competitive with the top 20, the top 25 law schools in the country. And so I'm dedicating myself and dedicating our great advancement department that the next 5 years, so my term will be renewed July 1st. The Board of Directors Committee has recommended that I be renewed for another term for 5 years. And my view is my first term was really dedicated to working with, Morris Ratner and Grace Hum and all the great, David Seward, all the great folks that are senior leadership in writing the ship. But now we need to create a foundation to sustain our success going forward and to truly leap into the higher reaches of American law schools. So that's the comprehensive campaign that will be coming. We're very much just in the preliminary stages of planning. It'll be silent for a while. We'll be reaching out to alumni to start, getting founding gifts. But that's where we're going over the next several years. And then the final issue is just talk about the long-range campus plan and the physical. And if I can figure it out, I think I still have some time. I'm going to try to share my screen. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, okay. Can you all see the long-range campus plan?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to keep it in this non-show mode. So I'm going to go through this quickly because I don't have a lot of time. This is actually prepared by David Stewart, our CFO, and Rhiannon Baylord, our Chief Operating Officer. But it'll give you a sense of where things are. So the basically has 3 phases. The first phase was what is now the Kachet Law Center. So we're done with that. If you haven't seen it, you have to come visit the campus. It is spectacular and quite beautiful. And I look forward to when the governors are back in person, because we'll be meeting up in the Deb Quokum room, the BCR, and we'll have the benefit of the deck just outside of that. 198 McAllister, the old Snodgrass Hall, is now gone, and we're up to about 5 stories, so they're well out of the ground, and we anticipate completion late summer 2023. So just a little over a year from now, we expect to be moving into a 14-story building. It has 3 stories of academic space. I'll show you some pictures of that. And it has 655 units of subsidized student housing. We then will be moving on to, we'll empty 100 McAllister, the tower, and we will begin renovating that building. I am very proud to say it's not yet, does not yet have the governor's signature, but you may have heard the state has generously granted in the 2022 budget $90 million. That's $90 million to Hastings to support the renovation of 100 McAllister. The total, it's about 46% of the cost of renovation. It's about $218 million renovation. So we'll do bonds, tax exempt bonds for the rest of that amount, but it's essentially an equity investment in the campus, and it's a huge benefit to the school. And it really, I think, demonstrates partly our great partnership with the state of California, Sacramento, and their belief in what we're doing with the academic village. So it's a very positive development. And then phase 3 is a property on the back side of the tower on Golden Gate and Leavenworth, which is a 27,000 square foot footprint owned by Local 2, the union. It's a hotel service workers union. And they're interested in partnering with us. We have an option agreement on their property to build that out in time. So this gives you just a bird's eye view of the campus. Here's the tower, of course, the 198 development, 200, and the Local 2 property is this red property on the right side, 201 to 247 Golden Gate. And this is another blocking view. So this is our neighborhood, looking from the north to the south there. And again, sort of gives you a sense. So this should show you that in terms of just square footage of buildings that allow us to create this incredible level of partnerships with other University of California campuses and other universities, we will almost certainly have more law school space than any law school in the country, including Harvard or Yale or any of the great schools. We will, as David Seward put it, we'll be looking at them in our rear view mirror. Here's a look at what the 198 project will look like when it's done. This is a slice of the first floor, and you can see the lower level as well. So these are this is the Shane Inspector trial courtroom and the Marvin and Jane Baxter appellate courtroom, which will be rebuilt. It will be absolutely astoundingly beautiful. There's a cafe as you're walking off the street. This is a 2-level atrium. And then there's rebuilt. This is essentially like the Louis B. Mayer auditorium that was in the basement of 198. We won't be calling it the LBM or Louis B. Mayer. It has, for $1 million, it could be the Rachel Ehrlich Auditorium. So that would be very exciting, Rachel. Just $1 million. It doesn't have to be, one check. Anyway, this is the look of what the atrium is going to look like. This is Lex Lab, which is our law tech law center. It's just going to be a beautiful spot. On the 7th floor, there will be a commons for students and any residents or students of the campus. And they'll have a wraparound deck that this is on the south side, and then the entire east side is also part of this deck. And there's a media room, there are study rooms up and down the structure. This gives you a sense of the units. Every unit most of them will be single occupancy, efficiencies, studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. Most of them will be studios and 1 bedroom apartments primarily. And this is just some of the amenities that will be available: bike storage, shared rooms. There's a fitness center, and so forth. It's, I think, it'd be a very attractive place for students to want to live. So I will leave it there. And so I've left a little bit of time to answer any questions on diversity, equity, inclusion, name change, the comprehensive campaign, or the long-range campus plan? Any questions, comments, concerns?
I have a question about the bonds, that aspect of financing, and I appreciate we don't have David here, other David.
Yeah.
There's what I was wondering is, are you going to look to float some specifically to the school community, or is that, I mean, I'm not sure how that works for Hastings itself or the college itself.
Good question. So on 198, we went to market actually in September 2020. So really in the thick of the COVID pandemic. And we were quite worried, and we were in pins and needles, and the bond market actually had seized up earlier in the year, back in May and June. And so we really didn't know what to expect, but we ended up, it didn't happen right away. You know, it's over several hours that you're on the market. Raymond James was our underwriter, but we ended up with $1.2 billion offered for $360 million of debt. And as I like to joke, and I always ask, well, why don't we just take the 1.2 billion? And David keeps saying, just remember credit cards, you have to pay that back. But it indicated the strength that the market had and the belief the market had in the project and the academic village and what we're doing. So it was nice validation from folks that have no skin in the game until they decide to put skin in the game. The bonds were mostly marketed by Raymond James to big banks and big investors, like, you know, Morgan Stanley and Wells Fargo and folks like that. And then they presumably resell them. It was under 5% interest rate. So back then the interest rates were very favorable. And so higher interest rates and inflation, it hurts us individually, it hurts me individually, but it actually helps in the bond market. And we don't know what the bond market will be. We'll be taking out a lot less then, but it's a good question and something I'd like to look into, to the extent that we might be able to market some of the bonds to the Hastings community more specifically. I don't know that they'd get a better deal than they'd get on the open market, but it'd be kind of nice and fun to have, you know, bond certificates and, you know, a real investment in your alma mater. So it's
Right.
I'll talk
Yeah.
to David, I'll talk to our underwriters.
My thought about that was that, is there a way to have people kind of do that investment, as opposed to, is it better just to donate to the building fund? And then at the same time, if they do it as an investment initially, do they then, is there a way to just donate the bond back
Yeah.
at the point of maturity or otherwise, to kind of give the school a double benefit in some way? Or is there too much self-dealing in that, even if it's not an member of the alumni community? Just a thought.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I mean, certainly straight up donations that are tax deductible benefit. So any kind of philanthropic giving is a good thing, and we all do it to different causes. I do think that some investment in your alma mater is kind of a nice thing to do. And if you have the wherewithal at the time it comes to maturity to just donate it, I think that would be a wonderful gesture as well. And even if you don't, you've still invested in your alma mater. I don't think there'd be a self-dealing issue. Others on the call may have a better sense of it than I do. But I wouldn't see the self-dealing in it, because you're working through the market. And Raymond James is really overseeing that market.
Carol has her hand up.
Oh yeah, sorry, Carol.
Hi. So, well, I first just want to say thank you for signing up again, because man, have you faced a few challenges. So I think we're probably all pretty grateful that you didn't just say, let someone else take over, because you know, you've handled it with grace and dignity. So thank you. And also congratulations on moving from, I'd forgotten it was 51% to 84. That's amazing on bar passage. And you know, you said 92% unemployment, but I didn't get what the number was that we jumped up from. What was that?
It was actually 93%.
Oh, we went down a little bit.
And so it's actually a little higher. Amy, I don't know if you're on it. It was in the 80s, but Amy
Oh,
can give
okay.
you the exact number.
Yeah, last
Yeah.
year was 87, actually.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, congratulations on that. And so I wanted to ask you, at the last meeting, I think it was Eddie pointed out the fact that alumni giving is apparently factored into the school rankings. And I just wanted to ask you if that's so. Do you know to what extent and how that works? I mean, it's great that we've raised, I think you said 16 million so far this year. And then secondly, if I can ask a second question, I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned the 90 million from the state that we're getting, which is great. But, you know, obviously we also need money for endowment. So would the state be able to help us in that regard? And are they also doing that with the other UC schools in any way? And also we're unique. So with that uniqueness, accrue to us a benefit in terms of some help with endowments?
Right, so I'll take the latter part. So the reason the state is giving us 90 million is it is a belief in what we're doing, but it's actually a belief in student housing. And so because we're doing student housing in San Francisco, which is a very, very tight market, and we're not only doing it for ourselves, but we're doing it for UCSF, that's going to have about 35% of the housing in 198. But we also have interest from San Francisco State. Berkeley graduate students and Berkeley faculty are interested because they might want to live in the city, and we're right on the BART line, so they can get to Berkeley pretty easily. So the investment that the state is making is really dedicated to the housing aspect of the tower. They would be disinclined to just give us money for our endowment. They would expect us to raise that from our alumni. And so I don't see that happening anytime or ever. That won't ever happen. The 90 million does help in terms of the resources. So the question of whether alumni giving affects U.S. News is a little bit of a complicated question. In one sense, it matters directly. They don't actually count alumni giving, but they count how big the number is that we devote in terms of resources per student, per capita. And so building buildings actually count for that. It's not a huge part of the U.S. News algorithm for calculating rankings, but it matters. So actually the $55 million that the state spent on 333, the $360 million we're spending on 198, that gets, those are which makes sense because we're improving our campus, which improves the experience for students. That gets calculated in a way that actually dwarfs the 16 million that we get from alumni. But where resources really make a difference is on the other factors that U.S. News counts. So the number one factor U.S. News counts is peer rankings. So other professors and deans rankings of Hastings is the number one factor. The number two factor are lawyer and judge rankings. So the fact that we're doing better in those two rankings as our footprint and our profile improves, so people are looking at us and saying, wow, Hastings is on the move. I think that those two factors are improving, both of which, or at least the peer rankings in particular, are sensitive to resources. Because if we have, say, endowed professorships, which would come from alumni, we can attract great professors from NYU, Columbia, Michigan to come visit, and maybe even come teach here, and that gets noticed by other schools. The third and fourth factors are LSAT and GPA. Those are directly connected to resources. So the $16 million that we get from alumni, especially the student scholarship money, when a student gets into Davis, Irvine, and Hastings, which are fairly comparably ranked, Davis and Irvine are in the 30s, around 40 somewhere. We're in the upper 40s to around 50. And so if we're going to compete for students that got into Davis and Irvine, I think we have certain advantages because we're in San Francisco, we're surrounded by courts and the tech sector. If you go to Davis, you're surrounded by cows. So if you're really into cows, Davis is a great place to go to law school. But what the students will often say to us, prospective students, is, "Well, I got a $25,000 a year scholarship from Davis, and you've only offered me a $15,000 a year scholarship. If you match Davis, I'll come to Hastings." And if we don't have the money to match Davis, then that student with a high LSAT and a high GPA goes to Davis, and they don't come to Hastings. And it may be a light mistake that they've made going to Davis rather than Hastings, but they don't know any better than that. And so resources that alumni giving has an absolutely direct effect. That's where those Virginia and Michigan endowments make all the difference. When you have a high LSAT, high GPA, and Virginia is competing with Georgetown or NYU or Columbia, they offer them either full scholarships or very attractive scholarships, and that's how they get those students to go. And so resources matter in different ways, but there is, my answer to Eddie, I think, was similar, that there is a direct line through things like LSAT and GPA, but US News is not counting alumni giving separately. I think my time might be up. So again, thank you. Well, I'm gonna have to take off around 3, but I'll stick around and really excited to hear the rest of the meeting, as much of the meeting as I can stay for. So thank you.
I had one quick question. Sorry, I'm on audio only because you can hear the other person in the meeting, David. But I was curious if, and it kind of relates to the name change, if this situation has also been an opportunity to educate the legislature about us as a UC campus, kind of a silver lining to the situation.
Potentially, we are working with the University of California Office of the President, and I think that we're not actually under the Regents. So we have this special relationship with the University of California. They grant our degrees, so the Regents approves our degrees, and they approve all of our degree programs. So if we have a new degree program like the Master's of Studies in Law or the Health Policy Law degree with UCSF, that does have to go through the University of California Office of the President because they are responsible for granting our degrees. But our money comes directly from the legislature. We don't get any money from the Office of the President, and I answer to the Board of Directors. I don't answer to the Regents. So to some extent, they kind of understand it, but nobody really understands it. I didn't understand it until I got to be dean because it's so complicated. And even Michael Drake, the president of the University of California, who I've now had the opportunity to speak to several times, he understands it because he was at UCSF as a faculty member, so he got to know us then. And then he was chancellor at UC Irvine before going to Ohio State and then coming back to head up the entire University of California system. So, Jerome, to kind of answer your question briefly, after not answering it briefly, I think it's just a continuing responsibility of ours to keep educating them about that. But the ultimate branded name, I think, has to have University of California in our branded name. And in my personal view, if we can get San Francisco to be in the branded name, we're going to be in a very good position to elevate our profile both in California and nationally.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I like to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on to employment, I always get the name of this committee wrong. Sorry, Employer-Employee Relations Committee. And Barbara, I'm going to hand the baton to you.
Thanks so much. I just want to quickly acknowledge Claudia is on the call here, and then our co-chair as well, Diana Cruz, who put together an awesome panel. I heard it was probably one of the higher attended panels by students in some time. And it was in partnership with Mario Lopez and the First Generation program. Back on February 25th, we had some great alumni participation. Sharif Jacobs, who's at Kecker, Wes Overson, and also Jasmine Important. They were panelists. And we got a lot of really good feedback. They gave students practical kind of advice about thinking about career paths. And it was focused on thinking about big law firms versus small law firms and some variations in traditional career opportunities. So I just want to give them kudos because they took leadership and got that organized, and we've heard some really good feedback. So then I'll defer to Amy. Amy, I know you're going to talk about the resume books and other opportunities for the board to support you in your endeavors to help our students with their career opportunities.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you to the committee. Yes, as Barbara said, that was an incredibly well-attended event and the students really appreciated. So I just add my thanks and appreciation to Claudia and Diane for putting that together. I'll fill in just a little bit more on some of the employment numbers that David shared. Again, overall employment was 93%, which is up from 87 in 2020, 89 in 2019, 85 in 2018. So really great upward trajectory. We're just thrilled with that. We also had 3 grads who were not employed because they were going into graduate studies, and 7 folks who were employed, but their start date was just slightly after our reporting deadline of March 15th. So if you add those folks in, it even brings us up another percentage point. US News counts full-time, long-term JD or bar passage required or JDA advantage jobs as the highest. And that category was up as well, up 80% from 73 last year. So really thrilled about that. We had funded 11 full-time, long-term jobs through the Bridge Fellowship Program and 2 Abascal Fellowships. So it's really great. And huge thank you to David and his team for continuing the support for the Bridge Fellowships. Again, this helps our grads who are going into public interest and public sector careers, many of which unfortunately are just unpaid to kind of get your foot in the door in a lot of our DAs and public defender offices. We also this year, again, thanks to David's generosity, were able to fund all of our students who applied for summer grants for work in public interest and public service, our HPILF grants. So that was absolutely wonderful. And it's a big help for them going forward in their career. As usual, we kept almost all of our grads in California and a huge percentage in San Francisco proper. And one area that I look forward to talking with Diane and Claudia about is some things for next year is kind of expanding students' ideas about where jobs might be, including even as far as Southern California. So I look forward to continuing to work with you all. As Barbara mentioned, and is in your packet, we have our Jumpstart resumes. These are our class of 2022 grads who are in the market. And it's just a quick link, and it's broken down between Southern California, Northern California, and litigation, transaction, or more government public interest. So if you are in the market, please take a look at those links. Feel free to pass them around. We'll continue to update them and take folks out